started out in this part of the business more like a virtual assistant, so helping people with anything online, really, administration-wise, with the goal of being able to work from anywhere and travel and not have a one set location for work.
Welcome to a new episode of Most Memorable Journeys. My guest today is somebody that I feel that I've known her for years, but we've never actually met in real life. And she is miles away from me. It's my morning that we are recording this episode. She's done a whole day's work. It's her evening. She is in New Zealand. And I know her as a world traveler. I also look at her like she's a snowbird. She leaves when it gets cold and she comes back when it gets warm again. She also is a business owner, and she is the example of it really being possible remotely, which, you know, that you can actually be a traveling business owner and have a good time. And I want to welcome to Most Memorable Journeys, Kate MacGregor.
Thank you so much. It's so nice to speak to you in person, although I can't hug you.
Well, we'll do that one day. Hopefully we'll do that one day.
Absolutely, in an airport somewhere. And I'm the same. I feel like I do know you from listening to your podcast and following your story as well along the way, mostly over, obviously, the last couple of years since you launched your podcast as well.
Wonderful. So let's start with the famous question. When were you on a plane for the first time?
Woo! As a child, we used to go to Australia on family holidays. Back then, we would go and visit family in Australia, and it was actually, for a lot of New Zealanders, it was a lot cheaper to fly to Australia than to fly between the islands in New Zealand, the domestic flights, because we just had one airline in New Zealand, and so there was no monopoly and it was very expensive. So yeah, we used to fly to Australia probably every couple of years and visit family.
Nice. It's Air New Zealand, isn't it? Does it still exist?
Yeah, Air New Zealand's our main airline in New Zealand now. We also have one other domestic airline as well, a cheap airline, Jetstar. And then we have a lot of international airlines obviously coming into New Zealand as well. So the Australian airline Qantas and a lot of others, especially now, they're all starting to come back, which is exciting. And the visitors are all starting to come back to New Zealand, which is so nice to see.
Yeah, I do want to talk. I want to talk about your trips, but I also want to talk about New Zealand a little bit, because I've been to New Zealand, listen to this, for 1 week. And I did all of New Zealand in 1 week, because I used to accompany a tour called, it was like an Australia round trip, which was a 3 weeks tour. And then when we had more than 10 people going on to New Zealand, we accompanied it. And I was on one of those trips, but it's like a blur. The only thing that I do remember, you know what I remember? I was on this bridge in Queenstown when they started bungee jumping. It had just started. And I really thought these people are crazy.
Right? That's still happening. That's still the same bridge where they jump off every day, hundreds of tourists.
But I think it was kind of invented there, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's the original one as well. Yeah, AJ Hackett is a New Zealander who invented that. Bungee jumping, you could do it in a few different places through New Zealand. I have not done it. Not for me.
Crazy. So Australia, you went to Australia, which is kind of they are your most friendly neighbors, I would say. You have a good connection with the Australians. Do you still go to Australia a lot?
Yeah, I not to visit so much. I mean, a lot of the international flights out of New Zealand fly via Australia a lot of the time. I've just recently been away this year, and I flew via Sydney up to America. So yeah, I haven't been to Australia to actually see Australia properly, and I definitely haven't seen all of Australia. So there's still a lot more to see closer to home here for me. And it's about a 3 or 4 hour flight for us from New Zealand to Australia. So it's our closest place to go internationally, but not too many differences. It's not a huge culture shock for us or anything like that. And a lot of New Zealanders do have family in Australia. So there's a big that became a huge thing during the pandemic, actually, and the borders were opening and closing between New Zealand and Australia, and people were getting stuck in the wrong countries.
It's funny though, I mean, when you think of it, for us here in Europe, a 4 hours flight is already quite far, and for you it's really the closest place that you can go to. So I remember I follow you on, I stalk you because I love what you do. And your last big trip that you were on was in Central America, right?
That's right. Yeah, I just spent 5 months in Nicaragua. And when I travel now, I like to travel I go away for winter each year, away from New Zealand. That's my snowbirding. And I choose a different country each time so that I can continue to travel and see new places. And I tend to stick to 1 or 2 countries over that period. So I was away for 5 months this time. And I spent the whole time in Nicaragua, which was amazing.
So you're not a country counter. You are somebody who wants to go deeper. You want to see the country.
Yeah.
Really.
I used to be. When I was younger, I did. I lived in London for 10 years and I actually worked as a tour guide as well around Europe. So definitely I was a country counter then because I could and because it was so easy to rack up the countries from living in London, close to Europe and things. But yeah, I've lost count now. And I would say I'm around 80 countries, but yeah, I don't travel to collect the country ticks anymore. I travel to see different cultures and sort of immerse myself in get to know the local community and how people live and work. And in saying that, I live with other expats in the community as well. So
yeah, but you want to know about a culture, you want to know about a country, you want to, as I said before, go a little deeper and find out how people tick.
Yeah, how the day goes, how people earn their living in these countries, how they live, the school systems, attempt to learn the language, eat the food. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And I always say that, or very often say that. I am sure that you probably agree with me that at the end of the day, you realize then when you go deeper and when you get to meet people that we are all the same.
Absolutely. Yeah. And this trip, was, I think, extra special because post-pandemic, it was the first time, obviously, in 2 years or more that any of us had traveled. And I travel alone, but just meeting other travelers as well, that, the world had just started to unbloom and people were starting to come out again and travel. And then just hearing everyone's experiences of the last 2 years as well and how each country had experienced the pandemic and how individuals had experienced it and what their thoughts were now and why they were traveling now, potentially for different reasons to what they originally did. And so that was extra special, I think, on this trip, because I think quick enough things will go back to normal in the travel industry and people might forget that actually, the special couple of years we've just had.
Yeah, I think it's going very fast. Planes are very full and airports are very full and many people are a little overwhelmed. But have you had a bad experience at all with overfilled airports or did everything go well?
No, I have had only one actually, of all the zillions of flights I've ever taken. One particular trip where I was living in London at the time and a group of us, 4 girls, decided to go to Thailand for Christmas and New Year's, which was a long way to go from London, and especially when 3 of us were from New Zealand. So it was a long way to go to Thailand and not go home to New Zealand. For 3 weeks we went. This was back in the day before you still checked in at the airport a lot earlier, but you didn't have to do the reconfirmation. So years ago, you had to reconfirm your flights before you flew. We didn't have to do that. But when we got to Bangkok airport to fly back to London, the airline told us that we hadn't reconfirmed and therefore they couldn't take us all the way through to London. And we would have to sign a waiver to say that they could take us, this was Royal Jordanian, so they could take us to Oman, but they couldn't take us any further. And that we had to sign a waiver to say we would make our own way to London. It was New Year's Day, and we had 3 teachers with us that needed to get back to London for work. So we signed the waiver and just crossed our fingers that we might get on the next flight. And we ended up spending a night in Oman airport. But once we got to Oman, we realized pretty quickly that what had happened, and there were a lot of other people on our flight, that they had overbooked the flight on purpose. They allowed, rightly so, families with children and things to get on that next flight to London. And we spent a night overnight in the airport, which wasn't overly bad, except for we were 4 girls just wearing singlets and shorts and nothing else in a country that is fairly covered up so that was a little bit awkward. And my friend in the night in the hotel tripped over the corner of her bed and smacked her face on the bedside table, and then proceeded to pass out on the plane the next day to London. And then we got to London and it was snowing and the conveyor belts had broken down at Heathrow Airport. So we waited another 3 hours for our bags at Heathrow, wearing flip-flops in the snow. Yeah, so that was a great story to tell now. At the time, it was a big adventure. But it is only I think it's the only airline disaster I've had.
Right. Yeah. Oh my God. Overbooks. I remember good old times when I was a tour guide. I remember, especially here in Cyprus, Cyprus Airways used to overbook flights, but they were generous. They would see when it wasn't many people, they would upgrade the ones that we filled. And I remember us tour guides, it was my biggest joy to actually go and find somebody and go and tell them, you have been upgraded in business class. And we used to pick them out by the way they were dressed.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And that's what the airlines do too, I believe.
Yes,
so,
yes.
Yeah. We used to get delayed quite a lot flying when I was a tour guide, flying back from Spain to London. Those flights always used to get delayed, but sometimes overnight. But that was kind of became the expected thing. So
it's funny though, isn't it, how the world has changed and how much we know now. And, I remember one flight when I was very, very young. I wasn't a tour guide yet. My flight from Rhodes to Zurich was 24 hours delayed. And it was because there was fog. We couldn't, in the time, they didn't have those systems yet at the time. Airplanes couldn't land when it was foggy. And nobody complained. I mean, of course, people were, I don't know, they were a little annoyed, but there was no lawyer mentioned or there was no legal action mentioned, I remember. Now, the first thing that I hear when something happens, my favorite thing to say to these people, especially when it's a technical, or sometimes you don't know why a flight is delayed. And I always say, I prefer to be a little late, but to be safe. And that always shuts them up.
Yeah. I've heard that before as well. Yeah, that's a good line. Yeah. I've been delayed in Zurich airport before as well, actually. Just remembered that on a Christmas trip. We got delayed for 12 hours and it would have been fine, but we had a lot of very drunk passengers by the time we got on the next flight.
Well, that's
12 hours in Zurich airport.
What else is there to do? You just start drinking. So, Kate, tell me, I mean, it's a little of a silly question that I ask people. Do you have a favorite part of the world? It's just, do you have one?
Oh, it's such a hard question.
I know.
I mean, I guess what comes straight to mind for me are some really special trips and they're places that I guess are so special that I've actually never made it back to, and I would love to one day. But because I like to see new places all the time, I haven't. Africa, and I know that's not a country, but Africa, the whole continent, very special place. I spent 3 months on an overland tour through Africa, camping a long time ago now. And my favorite city that I would consider living or revisiting and having a lot more time in is Valencia in Spain.
That's amazing. How interesting.
Yeah.
Yes.
I've spent a lot of time there when I worked as a tour guide, and it's just, I love it. It's such a beautiful city, and it's been developed over the years so nicely as well. So, but yeah, I haven't been back there for more than 10 years now. So
wow. I want to talk about that overland trip to Africa, which 3 months.
Yeah, 77-day tour it was. And
where did you start?
We started in Kenya, in Nairobi. Flew out on Boxing Day from London to Kenya. The first part of my trip was a loop that went northwards up to see the mountain gorillas. And then we came back to Nairobi and then picked up some more people and carried on. So we went down through Tanzania, the Serengeti, Malawi, Zambia, Zimbabwe, and then across Botswana, Namibia, and down to South Africa and finished in Cape Town.
That sounds magical. That sounds absolutely amazing. And was it accompanied? Was it like a tour?
Yeah, an overland company called Absolute Africa, who are still in business. They're owned by an Australian lady and a British man who live in London, I think, still at the moment. I actually did the tour, and then when I came back to London, I started working for them in their office. So I learned a whole lot more about that company and how it'll work behind the scenes. Fascinating. Overland touring like that is quite different to any kind of tour.
You see things. That's when you really see things. It's not like my 1 week in New Zealand.
Yeah. And camping, we were camping and cooking our meals all together. And I think that helps to see a lot more than what you usually would. And I don't think it's actually really that, of course you could do it, but it's not hugely possible for most people to travel that route on their own without a tour company. So you would spend a lot of money in bribes at the borders.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes it easier when you go, but it always makes it easier really when you go with somebody who knows. And that's why it's also always good to become friends with somebody from the place that you go to.
Yeah. And even if we didn't I mean, we did meet some people along the way that we've kept in touch with. This was around the time just before Facebook maybe started. So, obviously keeping in touch with people from your tour is a lot easier now. But I am definitely still in touch with a lot of them. We had international people on our tour, about 20 in total. And we just had a reunion a couple of years ago, actually, because a lot of us live in New Zealand now. So, yeah, it was a special time, special trip.
Yeah. Have you been to North Africa? Have you visited Tunisia or Morocco or any of these places?
I've been to, one or two places, not on tours, I've been to Morocco and Egypt.
Yeah. It is a very, very special continent, and I think very, very underestimated. There is so much beauty in Africa.
Yeah, it's huge.
So much beauty in the world. You don't know where to start really, and that's why I know that this question, what is your favorite place? It's a stupid question, but some people can really say it. This is my place. I can't say it. I don't know which one.
Yeah.
I could, but basically, if I could, I'd just be traveling all the time.
Yeah, yeah, and it's favorite for different reasons, right? So, and also whatever's top of mind. I was just speaking to somebody who's going to the Maldives, and my memory of the Maldives came up, and I was like, oh yeah, that's a beautiful place. Like picture, like a postcard everywhere you look.
Well, don't speak to me about the Maldives because
I've heard your story about the Maldives, actually.
Yeah. I was there for 5 months. 5 months on an island where you can walk around in 10 minutes. It's very, very beautiful, but you've seen the beauty after about 10 days.
Yeah. So I stayed on an island like that, but for 1 week, So I can imagine that your perception of the Maldives and mine is very different. That's why everyone has different places, I guess.
It was a very interesting experience, of course. And if it's funny because at the time I was 25 years old. Today, if I went there first, especially also with the internet, I could stay for 5 months without a problem at all. But, it's a life is a learning process.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. So, I've just been to a little small island actually on the Caribbean coast of Nicaragua. While I was there, there's some small islands called the Corner Islands. And they're very underdeveloped, tiny little Caribbean islands where the people there work in the fishing industry and diving, and there's not really any internet. There's only electricity from 1 o'clock in the afternoon through till 6 o'clock in the morning. And so it was a real holiday switch off, no internet while I was there, which was lovely. But I think you forget how much you rely on the internet.
Oh.
So 1 week was fine there as well for me. Probably could have done 2 weeks, but yeah.
It's a disease, isn't it? It really is. My hand automatically goes to that phone, totally unnecessarily most of the time. But yeah. Now let's talk a little bit about your work, because you are an online entrepreneur. What do you do? How does it work?
Yeah, I work, I help people to build online courses and websites. So other entrepreneurs who are building teaching other people anything, whatever is their specialty, I help them to pull that all together into the online space and have a website and an email set up and the online course with all the automations and technical side of it as well. So so I can do that all online from my laptop, which is what I did while I was just away on this 5-month trip. Yeah, that's been a journey. I started out in this part of the business more like a virtual assistant, so helping people with anything online, really, administration wise, with the goal of being able to work from anywhere and travel and not have a one set location for work. Yeah, so I've just been exploring that over 5 years, really, and finally kind of had hit my niche and figured it out and was able to go full-time into that business.
Because I'm a coach and an NLP practitioner, it doesn't have to be coaching or anything like that. It could be anything that you want to teach, anything that you want to pass on. If you are a photographer, or if you are give me an example.
All sorts. I help people, like lots of yoga teachers. Just trying to think of all my clients now. Today I spoke with a lady who helps people to use horses for therapy. So trains people using horses for therapy. I've worked with midwives who teach empowered birthing techniques. Mums and babies, like birth videos, online courses, all sorts. Yeah, people can teach anything.
People then they will, because of the fact that they will go online, they are not bound to a place anymore. They can also travel around.
Yeah, I think that's the goal for most people. Is either to travel or just have more flexibility in their life. and earning money for their value that they have, because I think a lot of people give a lot away for free as well.
I do.
And then realize, yeah, I think we all do by nature, but realizing that they can monetize in the nicest way possible. Because a lot of people spend a lot of time on social media and on YouTube, trying to build audiences, and they're not getting paid there. Not many people are getting paid there. People are dancing around doing reels on social media, and not a lot of them are getting paid for that either, but that is what a lot of people are hoping for and trying to do. Whereas having something like what I help people with, you're directly earning an income from whatever it is, the value that you're providing.
What if somebody already has a website? What if somebody already has a couple of courses? Can that be integrated?
Oh, yeah. So we can move everything into. So I work on a platform called Kajabi, which allows people to host everything in one place, but it also integrates with other platforms as well. Yeah. So people can take it in stages, move things over in stages. Yeah.
So for those people who are listening and who are interested, we are going to put the links to Kajabi and of course also to Kate MacGregor in the show notes. And you can get in touch with her, because I think she is a good example of how it's done. Because I watch you and I admire you, this independence, the way you go, it's fantastic. Now, a question: how did you feel during COVID, during the pandemic? Another question: were you had just, let me think. It started in March, so that was were you about to go somewhere?
No, I actually returned from the year before. Late 2019, I returned from Malaysia. I'd been in Southeast Asia for winter, and I returned, and I'd actually decided that I probably wasn't going to go away next winter. I just wanted to settle for a while. I moved back to my home city where I'm originally from, and actually just wanted to focus on my business. I actually wanted to build that up and get the momentum on it before I would then go off traveling again. So I had decided. So when COVID rolled around and New Zealand shut its borders and we had our first lockdown in March 2020, I was okay. I was fine about the non-travel because I wasn't planning to go anywhere. And actually for me, it was a bit of a relief. It was a slowdown, I think, for a lot of people, the break that people needed. Yeah, partway through the year, I guess. That was the first lockdown for us, was 1 month. And then I'm in the South Island of New Zealand, so we didn't get hit so hard with COVID. The North Islanders had a lot more lockdowns than us. Yeah, and so we had another whole year, and then we went back into lockdown in August 2021. And by that stage, I was full-time in my own business. So not a lot changed day to day for me then. I was still working from home. I guess the only thing was I was restricted to just going for walks around the neighborhood and not being able to meet friends for coffee and lunches. And actually by that stage, I was starting to go to co-working spaces and maybe visit other towns in New Zealand because I could and carry on working. So yeah, that one was a little bit different for me. And then by that stage, I was like, okay, it's time now. Like, I'm ready to travel. So let's open the borders.
Yeah, and I've seen pictures of your neighborhood and your walks, and how beautiful. I mean,
it is.
Many people say, I'm originally from Switzerland, and there's a lot of similarities between New Zealand and Switzerland when it comes to the natural beauty.
I think so, yeah. And actually, it's one thing I'm very grateful for is having been locked down in New Zealand or during pandemic being in New Zealand, because the way I travel, I actually could have been anywhere in the world when that happened. And we, my friends and I made the most of that too, because as you know, New Zealand is full of international visitors at the best of times. So although we have this beautiful country, a lot of us take it for granted and don't see all of our own country before we leave to go see the rest of the world. And that's certainly the case for me. I hadn't seen all of New Zealand. So during the pandemic, friends and I would go away for weekend trips. I went to the Milford Sound, which is one of the most visited places in New Zealand.
I've been there in my week.
Right? In your week that you visited?
Yes.
Well, we went there, we drove there, and we did not see one other car on that road. And when we got there was like no buses, nothing. In the boat that we went on, there were 7 other people. And we think that they were just part of the tour guide company. So that, I mean, so grateful to be able to experience places like that with no overrun tourism and things. Yeah. And also the tourism industry was very good to New Zealanders during that time and gave discounts and things as well. So yeah, there's still a couple more things to see in New Zealand, but we definitely ticked a few off while we were waiting for the borders to open.
Absolutely amazing. I mean, I know, as I said, it's definitely a place that I want to go back to, because in that week, I just got a tiny taste of what could be. But it's far. You see, this is the thing. And you
So
guys
far.
are far away. And that's why I also know that when you go somewhere, you go for a bit. You don't just go for
That's
2,
it.
3 days, because it's a very long flight to go somewhere.
Yeah, it is. That is part of the reason I go for so long when I go somewhere. It's get that flight out of the way and stay for a while.
Make it worth it.
Yeah, the flight that I just took up to Nicaragua, I flew not directly, but like all the way through Christchurch to Sydney, Sydney to Los Angeles. I had a bit of a stopover in Los Angeles for a few hours, and then flew into Liberia Airport in Costa Rica and stayed one night, and then crossed the border the next day into Nicaragua. And that the flight all the way through up to Costa Rica, I had been traveling for 40 hours and I didn't sleep on those flights.
Yeah.
And
Are you not I'm not a good sleeper on planes. Are you not?
No, not really. No,
And it's
not at
funny
all.
because, I mean, people, I was a tour guide for 11 years worldwide, and people would, they think, oh, you must be fine. I'm not fine. And I had one, I came back from California once to Switzerland for a couple of days, and then I had to go to Singapore. And that was a lot. That was a very long time difference. And I remember waking up in Singapore in the morning and I just couldn't stand up. Oh, I was feeling dizzy. So I had to crawl to the bathroom and put some
my
water
goodness. Yeah, it's very hard on the body. I don't know how those flight attendants do it, but yeah, no, I'm not a nervous traveler at all. I'm not scared to fly or anything, but I'm not comfortable enough to sleep on an airplane.
Yeah. Well, I know I always say that I turned 60 2 years ago, and I always said after 60, I'm only going to start flying business class, but I need to monetize my podcast more.
Yeah, right.
Hint, hint, if anybody is listening.
Yeah. No, you need those airlines on board to sponsor.
Yeah. So, Kate, what's next? Okay, you just came back. So how far in advance do you decide what you're going to do next? Or how does that work? How does it hit you?
Yeah, not far in advance at all. I am quite fluid and flexible in what I do. So right now I'm back in New Zealand because I do try to go away every winter. I don't have a home base, and so when I'm in New Zealand, it's a bit tricky. I could get a 6-month rental lease for somewhere to stay, or what I'm doing at the moment is I'm full-time house and pet sitting. So I'm moving around to different places, looking after people's pets, which is quite busy at the moment because the world is beginning to travel again. So people are starting to get away, and especially at this time of year for Christmas and things. So I plan to do this through till next winter, and then I probably go away again, but I won't decide where I will go until early next year, maybe March or April next year.
So no idea. You will see something will trigger it, maybe, if you see.
Yeah. I mean, my easiest situations are kind of Southeast Asia or Central America. Like that's kind of, it's the climates that I like. There's still places for me to see in those areas. I do like to try and speak Spanish. So that's why Central America has the pull for me. But then there's I haven't been back to Valencia in Spain, and that I'd love to go back to. And but it's whether or not I would go back there for that amount of time and what else I would do. So something will come to me in March or April next year. And I usually fly out in May sometime.
Another thing that I picked up now while we're talking, you mentioned pet sitting, house sitting. That is also for somebody who likes pets and who it's a thing.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I used to do it. A few years back, I did it for a couple of years full time. Also, sometimes when I go overseas, I do it as well. And yeah, it's a great way to see different places. Sometimes, like right now, I'm staying at a friend's house looking after their cats, the 2 cats you can see on the wall behind me, not on the podcast. And just see other areas of the country as well. So move around. I do love animals. So, and often when I stay in rental, if I have my own rental place, I'm not allowed to have pets. So, and obviously it's not really very convenient for me to have a pet if I'm traveling all the time. So.
That's true. So it's the perfect opportunity to have spend some time with animals when you just want a little. It's like looking after somebody else's kids. You can
Yeah, easier, much easier than children. Much easier.
Totally. One question that I wanted to ask you, and then we got carried away. How did this start? I mean, you said as a kid you were traveling from New Zealand to Australia, but what turned you into this need?
I got the travel bug.
I know that it's a disease and it will never leave me. And how did it start? Did it start with you going to London and being a tour guide? Was that the kickoff?
Yeah, probably. I did travel. Other than Australia, when I was at school. I went on a school exchange to Japan for 3 weeks. So that was a huge culture change for me coming from New Zealand. And I was only 14 or 15 years old at the time. I stayed with a host family, but there was a group of us as well. So that was probably my first glimpse of the world so differently, because obviously Australia is very similar to New Zealand. So, and then from there, I finished school, did some study, and then decided what a lot of New Zealanders and Australians do is to head over to Europe. So went to London. We just have a really good exchange with England over visas. So for most people can get a 2-year working holiday visa when they go to England. My grandfather is Scottish, so I could get a little bit longer. So I flew the nest with a lot of other Kiwis and went over to London. Actually lived in Scotland when I first got over there in St Andrews.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and then I guess I joined the travel industry after that Africa trip and eventually worked for a festival tour company that traveled around Europe as a tour guide and eventually the operations manager of that company as well. So yeah, definitely got the travel bug when I lived in London.
And even though and we all know that the travel industry and whoever is in the hospitality industry is underpaid, but we don't mind. I never did. It's just no. It's a passion.
Yeah, it is. And I think for a period of your life, like I definitely couldn't do what I used to do back then now. But in my 20s, absolutely. Like the festival tours we used to go on, amazing and such fun and no sleep and meet lots of people.
So much to drink, no sleep.
So much fun. Yeah. And so that was a great experience. And then when I came back to New Zealand after 10 years, I actually still worked in the travel industry, but more corporate. So taking people away on their corporate sales trips. So people that had reached sales targets in their company.
Yeah.
Incentives, yeah. And so I did a couple of incentive trips to Hawaii and to South Africa and learned very quickly that drunk backpackers and drunk business people are actually very similar. If not worse, the business people.
Yes, and, because the drunk business people also feel entitled.
Yeah, they have high expectations. Yeah, and so from there, I moved out of travel, but into a similar industry, working in conferences and events, but just locally in New Zealand. Yeah, and very similar industry. Long hours, no pay, little pay, and lots of good fun, but also had a time period.
Yeah, and I think, this is what I don't know if you had a chance, but I just uploaded a podcast episode with a lady who was a corporate lawyer at Swiss International Airlines and became a flight attendant because, as we say, if you don't follow your dreams, they will die in your comfort zone. So I think you are a good example of not living in the comfort zone.
Yeah,
once you leave, it's not a nice place. You see, the comfort zone can be very ugly.
Yeah, and I think like the pandemic almost got me back in the comfort zone, but that's why it was so important for me to get out traveling again, and with my business too. And actually, I don't know if you know, but my business is called Out of Office. Like that's what it's about, and it's not just about me being out of office, but it's about helping other people to get more time out of office, because we're in this culture now where people, if they work in corporate or even if they have their own business, where people feel like they have to be so busy and what I call wear the busy badge, like busy, and not get out, forget to enjoy life, like forget to take time and have a lifestyle that works around your business rather than the other way around.
Totally. And I think this is another one of the upsides of the pandemic, because, I remember some of my friends, especially in Switzerland as well, who were, fighting to have a day where they could work at home, and it wasn't allowed and it wasn't possible. And then suddenly everybody could work at home and the world didn't stop. It still continued to turn.
And we learned a lot from it, and
Yes.
health wise as well. Like, I know it was great at the time when the pandemic started. I called myself a virtual assistant, and I belonged to a network of other virtual assistants here in New Zealand. And I remember when we had a Friday night Zoom drinks one time, just all kind of laughing in a sigh of relief that finally we didn't have to explain to people what a virtual assistant was. Everyone could understand what we did because they needed us now.
Absolutely. So amazing. So time is flying when you're having fun. We're done with this podcast.
Amazing.
I very much enjoyed it. We're going to put everything, and this website, your website is called Out of Office.
Yeah, NZ Out of Office.
So we're going to put all this in the show notes. Get in touch with Kate MacGregor. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for being on Most Memorable Journeys today.
Thanks so much, Elizabeth. Lovely to talk with you.
If you enjoy my podcast, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. You will find all the information in the show notes.